When it comes to who identifies as LGBT, there's a generation divide in the US.
Yes, queen.
Between 3 to 4.5% of adults identify as LGBT, compared to about 8 to 9% of teenagers. The thinking is that younger generations feel more comfortable sharing their identity, and it's important that we get these statistics right.
The old expression is, if you aren't counted, you don't count.
This is Karith Conron from UCLA's Williams Institute.
In talking with state legislators and federal policymakers, the first question that people ask you when you go into their office is, how many people live in my district? And if you can't answer that question, it's very hard for anybody to give your issue any serious consideration.
And this is why Karith started doing this kind of research. Because being counted and being visible, it really matters, especially if you want politicians or policymakers to address issues important to your community. The U.S. Census, which officially surveys the population, has never directly asked any questions about the LGBT community, but researchers have developed an interesting workaround. In 1990, the census added the term unmarried partner as an option for households, mainly with straight couples in mind. This was to account for the growing number of people living together outside of marriage. Researchers began to indirectly use this data to count same-sex couples, since the census also asks the sex of each person in a household. So someone can look at that combined information to see how many same-sex partners live together in the US. But this indirect form of counting can lead to mistakes. It's much easier to just ask people directly.
So in 2020, an improvement was made to the form, and options include a same-sex married partner, a same-sex unmarried partner, an opposite-sex married partner, an opposite-sex unmarried partner.
But this doesn't mean that every LGBT person is going to be counted. The new questions are only counting same-sex couples who live together. So if you're a lesbian couple but not living together, you're not counted. If you don't identify as male or female, there's no way to note this. In fact, Karith estimates that the census overlooks about 80% of people in the LGBT community.
I think it would be ideal if the U.S. Census surveys would include questions that ask people about their current gender identity, coupled with questions that ask about assigned sex at birth. This is in addition to questions that we ask people about their sexual orientation identity.
Since the 90s, activists in the trans community have pushed for ways to be identified on surveys beyond the census. And by increasing their visibility in survey data, they've gotten results.
So even doing an analysis of NIH funding for transgender research, I've seen a major increase in the number of grants funded for transgender folks over the last 10 years.
This is huge. With this funding, researchers can develop healthcare specifically for the trans community. Despite the shortcomings of the current census, Karith believes that it will eventually grow more and more inclusive.
I am confident that there are many people within federal government that believe that inclusive data collection is a priority and that data collection will move forward.